sometimes the preacher and some of us have had a little problem. There's still a few old die-head farmers around, you know, and we love rain in July and August. 4th of July weekend, he prayed that it would be dry so he could go camping. But it rained. I want to share a little story. I asked you if I could tell a little story. I want to share a little story that kind of fits in, I think, with what we've been doing here this week. This story it unfolds in a little town, something like Millerville. A little town, and it's got 3 churches in it. One church is over here, and one church is over there, and one's over there, and they're all within seeing distance of each other. And through the years, things have not went so well between the churches. There's always been a little friction, a little jealousy, and things like that. And all of a sudden, down in the middle of these churches, there's a vacant lot, and someone makes the announcement that the vacant lot has been sold. Well, in a couple of weeks, they began to construct a building down there. Some of the guys that belong to the churches, they get jobs down there, and they're building this building. And what's the building going to be? And finally, the word leaks out. A man has bought this vacant lot, and he's building a bar. He's building a bar in this town, and they never had a bar. And gosh, I mean, things began to escalate right there. Now, we don't really need a bar in this town. So this preacher talks to that preacher, and that preacher talks to this preacher, and unity kind of takes place. And they get together and say, you know, we don't really need this bar in town. And the churches kind of all get together and say, you know, we don't need this thing. And they form committees, and they begin to have some prayer circles and some prayer vigils and things, and they go down and visit with the gentleman and say, brother, you didn't have your bar here in our town. He tells him his story. He said, I worked all my life. And he said, now I'm retired, and I took my life savings, and all my life, he said, I dreamed about owning a bar. And he said, I'm going to build this bar right here in this town. Well, they stepped up their efforts to try to keep him from it, and they continued their prayer vigils and things like that, but the bar just kept going up. Finally, it got so far that he put out an announcement. Next Saturday is opening day. His opening day, and he said, we're going to have a band in here, and the first 100 people that come through are going to get a free drink. Next Saturday. So they really put in a lot of effort. What are we going to do? We don't want this bar in this town, and they put on an all-night prayer vigil. Now the man in his haste to put this thing together forgot a few things, and one of the things that he forgot was lightning rods. And on Friday evening, just about like this time, a terrible lightning storm came through. It struck the building, no lightning rods. The volunteer fire department couldn't get there soon enough, and the building was totally destroyed. Totally destroyed. But he also forgot something else in his haste. He didn't have any insurance. This man was beside himself. He didn't have anything. His life savings were gone. And he got angry. He got angry like you and I do sometimes and tried to blame somebody, and he blamed these churches. And he even hired him a lawyer, and he brought up a lawsuit against these churches. Well, then they had to hire a lawyer to defend themselves. And so they go before this judge, and he presents his case, his lawyer does. He said, everything I've got is lost. And he says, because of these churches and their people. They prayed that I wouldn't get this bar. And of course, their lawyer had to go into defense, and he said, you know, you can't blame it on these churches. It was an act of God, but it didn't come from them. They didn't have anything to do with it. I mean, it's not anything that they could have done to cause anything like this. The judge heard the case, and then he went back to his chambers. He said, I need to study about this a few minutes. And about an hour later, he come back and he said, you know, he said, I've sat on this bench a long time. And he said, I've heard a lot of peculiar cases, but he said, this is the most unusual one. And he said, I'm having a lot of trouble making this decision. He said, on one hand, I've got a farmer, barkeeper, that believes in the power of prayer. And on the other hand, he said, I've got 3 churches and congregations that don't.